It had been a lonely winter for a 14-year-old. I had spent the first few weeks of the vacation with my mother and stepfather in Dehra. Then they left for Delhi, and I was pretty much on my own. Of course, the servants were there to take care of my needs, but there was no one to keep me company. I would wander off in the mornings, taking some path up the hills, come back home for lunch, read a bit, and then stroll off again till it was time for dinner. Sometimes I walked up to my grandparents' house, but it seemed so different now, with people I didn't know occupying the house. The 3-month winter break over, I was almost eager to return to my boarding school in Shimla. It wasn't as though I had many friends at school. I needed a friend, but it was not easy to find one among a horde of rowdy, pea-shooting 8th formers who carved their names on desks and stuck chewing gum on the class teacher's chair. Had I grown up with some other children, I might have developed a taste for schoolboy anarchy, but in sharing my father's loneliness after his separation from my mother, and in being bereft of any close family ties, I had turned into a premature adult. After a month in the 8th form, I began to notice a new boy, Umar, and then only because he was a quiet, almost taciturn person who took no part in the form's feverish attempt to imitate the Marx Brothers at the circus. He showed no resentment at the prevailing anarchy, nor did he make a move to participate in it. Once he caught me looking at him, and he smiled ruefully, tolerantly. Did I sense another adult in the class? Someone who was a little older than his years? Even before we began talking to each other, Omar and I developed an understanding of sorts, and we'd nod almost respectfully to each other when we met, in the classroom corridors, or the environs of the dining hall or the dormitory. We were not in the same house. The house system practiced its own form of apartheid, whereby a member of one house was not expected to fraternize with someone belonging to another. Those public schools certainly knew how to clamp you into compartments. However, these barriers vanished when Omar and I found ourselves selected for the school called hockey team, Omar as a fullback and I as the goalkeeper. The taciturn Omar now spoke to me occasionally, and we combined well on the field of play. A good understanding is needed between a goalkeeper and a fullback. We were on the same wavelength. I anticipated his moves. He was familiar with mine. Years after, when I read Conrad's The Secret Sharer, I thought of Omar. It wasn't until we were away from the confines of school, classroom and dining hall that our friendship flourished. The hockey team traveled to Sanavar on the next mountain range, where we were to play a couple of matches against our old rivals, the Lawrence Royal Military School. This had been my father's old school, so it was keen to explore its grounds and peep into its classrooms. Omar and I were thrown together a good deal during the visit to Sanavar, and in our more leisurely moments, strolling undisturbed around a school where we were guests and not pupils, we exchanged life histories and other confidences. Omar, too, had lost his father. Had I sensed that before? Shot in some tribal encounter on the frontier, for he hailed from the lawless land beyond Peshawar. A wealthy uncle was seeing to Umar's education. We wandered into the school chapel, and there I found my father's name, A. Bond, on the school's roll of honor boards. Old boys who had lost their lives while serving during the 2 world wars. What did his initials stand for? Asked Omar. Aubrey Alexander. Unusual name, like yours. Why did your parents call you Rusty? I'm not sure. I told him about the book I was writing. It was my first one and was called 9 months, the length of school term, not a pregnancy. And it described some of the happenings at school and lampooned a few of our teachers. I had filled 3 slim exercise books with this premature literary project, and I allowed Omar to go through them. He must have been my first reader and critic. They are very exciting, he said, but you'll get into trouble if someone finds them, especially Mr. Fisher. I had to admit it wasn't great literature. I was better at hockey and football. I made some spectacular saves, and we won our matches against Sanawar. When we returned to Shimla, we were school heroes for a couple of days and lost some of our reticence. We were even a little more forthcoming with our other boys. And then Mr. Fisher, my housemaster, discovered my literary opus, 9 months, under my mattress and took it away and read it, as he told me later, from cover to cover. Corporal punishment then being in vogue, I was given 6 of the best with a springy Malacca cane, and my manuscript was torn up and deposited in Mr. Fisher's waste paper basket. And I had to show for my efforts were some purple welts on my bottom. These were proudly displayed to all who were interested, and I was a hero for another 2 days. Will you go away too when the British leave India? Omar asked me one day. I don't think so, I said. I don't have anyone to go back to in England, and my guardian, Mr. Harrison, too seemed to have no intention of going back. Everyone is saying that our leaders and the British are going to divide the country. Shimla will be in India, Peshawar in Pakistan. Oh, it won't happen, I said glibly. How can they cut up such a big country? But even as we chatted about the possibility, Nehru, Jinnah and Mountbatten and all those who mattered were preparing their instruments for major surgery. Before their decision impinged on our lives and everyone else's, we found a little freedom of our own in an underground tunnel that we discovered below the 3rd flat. It was really part of an old, disused drainage system, and when Omar and I began exploring it, we had no idea just how far it ended. After crawling along on our bellies for some 20 feet, we found ourselves in complete darkness. Omar had brought along a small pencil torch, and with its help, we continued writhing forward. Moving backwards would have been quite impossible. Until we saw a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Dusty, musty, very scruffy, we emerged at last onto a grassy knoll a little way outside the school boundary. It's always a great thrill to escape beyond the boundaries that adults have devised. Here we were in unknown territory, to travel without passports, that would be the ultimate in freedom. But more passports were on their way and more boundaries. Lord Mountbatten, Viceroy and Governor-General Tooby came for our Founders' Day and gave away the prizes. I had won a prize for something or the other and mounted the rostrum to receive my book from this towering, handsome man in his pinstripe suit. Bishop Cotton's was then the premier school of India, often referred to as the Eton of the East. Viceroys and governors had graced its functions. Many of its boys had gone on to eminence in the civil services and armed forces. There was one old boy, about whom they maintained a stolid silence, General Dyer, who had ordered the massacre at Amritsar and destroyed the trust that had been building up between Britain and India. Now Mountbatten spoke of the momentous events that were happening all around us. The war had just come to an end. The United Nations held out the promise of a world living in peace and harmony, and India, an equal partner with Britain, would be among the great nations. A few weeks later, Bengal and Punjab provinces were bisected, riots flared up across northern India, and there was a great exodus of people crossing the newly drawn frontiers of Pakistan and India. Homes were destroyed, thousands lost their lives. The common room radio and the occasional newspaper kept us abreast of events, but in our tunnel, Omar and I felt immune from all that was happening, worlds away from all the pillage, murder, and revenge. And outside the tunnel, on the pine knoll below the school, there was fresh, untrodden grass, sprinkled with clover and daisies. The only sound we heard were of hammering of a woodpecker and the distant insistent call of the Himalayan barbet. Who could touch us there? And when all the wars are done, I said, a butterfly will still be beautiful. Did you read that somewhere? No, it just came into my mind. Already you are a writer. No, I want to play hockey for India or football for Arsenal, only winning teams. You can't win forever. Better to be a writer. When the monsoon arrived, the tunnel was flooded. When the monsoon arrived, the tunnel was flooded. The drain choked with rubble. We were allowed out to the cinema to see Laurence Olivier Hamlet, a film that did not think to raise our spirits on a wet and gloomy afternoon. But it was our last picture that year because communal riots suddenly broke out in Shimla's Lower Bazaar, an area that was still much as Kipling had described it. A man who knows his way there can defy all the police of India's summer capital. And we were confined to school indefinitely. One morning after prayers in the chapel, the headmaster announced that the Muslim boys, those who had their homes in what was now Pakistan, would have to be evacuated, sent to their homes across the border with an armed convoy. The tunnel no longer provided an escape for us. The bazaar was out of bounds. The flooded playing fields was deserted. Omar and I sat on a damp wooden bench and talked about the future in vaguely hopeful terms, but we didn't solve any problems. Mountbatten and Nehru and Jinnah were doing all the solving. It was some time for Omar to leave. He left along with some 50 other boys from Lahore, Pindi and Peshawar. The rest of us Hindus, Christians, Parsis helped them load their luggage into the waiting trucks. A couple of boys broke down and wept. So did our departing school captain, a Pathan who had been known for his stoic and unemotional demeanor. Omar waved cheerfully to me and I waved back. We had vowed to meet again someday. The convoy got through safely enough. There was only one casualty, the school cook, who had strayed into an off-limits area in the foothill town of Kalika and been set upon by a mob. He wasn't seen again. Towards the end of the school year, just as we were all getting ready to leave for the school holidays, I received a letter from Omar. He told me something about his new school and how he missed my company and our games and our tunnel to freedom. I replied and gave him my home address, but I did not hear from him again. Some 17 or 18 years later, I did get news of Omar, but in an entirely different context. India and Pakistan were at war, and in a bombing raid over Ambala, not far from Shimla, a Pakistani plane was shot down. Its crew died in the crash. One of them, I learnt later, was Omar. Did he, I wonder, get a glimpse of the playing fields we knew so well as boys? Perhaps memories of his childhood flooded back as he flew over the foothills. Perhaps he remembered the tunnel through which we were able to make our little escape to freedom. But there are no tunnels in the sky.